Okay, Vice Chair Carlson, I'd like to accept the report. We have a second. Delegate Aldrich seconds to accept the report. Colleagues, do you have any questions for the report, Mr. Beal? Hearing none, Ms. Nelson, can you do the roll call to accept today's report?
Yes, I'll make a roll call vote for accepting the report. Mara Russert, how do you vote?
Great.
Thank you. Mara Russert votes green. Honorable Paul Slater, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Paul Slater votes green. Honorable Seth Bailey, how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Seth Bailey votes green. Madam Chair, we have 3 members voting in the affirmative or pleasing. 1 member absent, 1 member excused. Madam Chair, have a amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Thank you, Mr. Beal, for your first report on behalf of the Office of Management and Budget. We're going to proceed to the second report, the recap of the FY 2024 comprehensive budget. By Mr. Beal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, this particular report here is 2 pages. I tried to be concise and straightforward as I could be. First page there is there's 9 subject matters mentioned. And the first part of it is just summarizing some of the activities that occurred during the 24 budget process, which was just completed at the end of September. And number 1 simply reads that on March 30th, the controller issued the 24 general fund revenue projection in the gross amount of $216,602,000, and then less to set aside the 55.3 million, excuse me, a total of 161,214,000 was available for general fund budgeting. And then letter A is per the permanent fund 5-year plan. The controller on April 11th issued a permanent fund income and the amounts available for general fund budgeting. So 40 million was available and 21.5 million in excess revenue above the 40 million. So the 40 and the 21 really means there was 61 million total in excess income. Of that, 40 million goes to the budget. Letter B, the general fund budget revenue was the total of the revenue projection and the permanent income. So therefore, it's a total of 201.2 million. And this is 2.2, almost 2.3 million more in the 23 amount. Number 2, on May 12th, the indirect cost recovery amount was issued in the amount of 23.5 million, which is 500,000 more than 23. The IDC funds go to eligible general fund programs serving external fund programs. Number 3, in April, once the fund amounts were known, the work on the annual budget instructions manual or BIN started. The main question initially was whether to move to a 2-year budgeting cycle, which would have been fiscal year 24 and 25. Because this would require amending Navajo statute, meaning Title 12, Chapter 7, the Appropriations Act. In the act, it mentions annual budgeting and fiscal year budgeting. So that would have had to be amended. The decision from at least from the president's office in particular, was at that early stage of their administration and the government at the time. They don't want to do that. Let's wait until we'll wait till later to do that. With this.
1 second. I know we're going to go line by line, and then Vice Chair Carl Slater has a question. I guess Mr. Beal, would you prefer to speak to the committee about the conclusions and recommendations? Just to begin that dialogue.
Okay.
And then we can do the recommendations. You've been very helpful to the committee in walking us through all of the steps But we also respect your time, so providing that there is time that the committee can engage in the discussion for the recommendations and solutions with you, I think that would be where we could continue the discussion, because I don't want Vice Chair to lose his question. I have no idea what his question is, but just turn the time back over to you so we can talk about the recommendations.
Okay, Madam Chair, as I said, the first page, 1 through 9, actually going to the second page, 1 through 13. All that is informing the reader some of the key activities that happen.
Right.
And the point there really is to show that everything got crunched. And I'm gonna cover that now under conclusions and recommendations. Number 1, the budget process got off to a slow start. And that caused several timelines to be missed, which in turn has caused errors due to having to do work without adequate time to ensure accuracy and completeness. And by that, I mean, when you read numbers 1 through 13, you'll see that even development of the BIM really took a while, both on the executive side and then when it came across to the legislative side. So again, I'm gonna say in here a bit later on, but the problem that, well, I'm jumping ahead. Let me just go through it. So the solution would be that proper planning should be done next time, next budget cycle. So the budget process can be done in a timely way. The involved parties should work and coordinate together. That's the first general point of view or perspective that OMB and myself are making to the committee's attention. Number 2, many of the key players in the budget process were new. For example, council delegates and the committees, the membership, the branch chiefs and their staff, and division and other program personnel. So there was not full understanding of the duties, roles, responsibilities during the budget process. This caused some confusion and misunderstanding. And again, when you add number 1, we got started late, and then everyone's new. It was hard to control well. So the solution there is provide more training and orientation to staff on the budget process and to the committees. Also, that OMB be included in most budget discussions by BNF committee. So the purpose and intent of budget decisions is better understood. Okay, by that I mean, there was a lot of dialogue that was going on the BNF side. And it appeared to be a lot with legislative council, advice and so forth. And we didn't know about it. We didn't know what was going on. So as an example, the BIM, the legislative council's office, the advisor, took it and reworked it quite a bit without explanation why and how come and so forth, which is a departure from past practice, where according to the Appropriations Act, it reads that OMB prepares the BIM. And the way we do it, we work with the contributors, which is OOC, DOJ, DPM, and various others, but those are the 3 key ones. And that comes over in the form of a proposed document. At that point, BNF does the legislative point of view and so on. But it all got mixed up there. And it just delayed, and there was a couple of times you heard me stand and speak and say, I don't know how this is going. We're not doing it the way we typically do it. And I didn't understand, neither did OMB. So that's what I'm describing there. Number 3, OMB, like many other programs, was understaffed and overworked due to many vacancies. For example, OMB had 40% of our personnel positions unfilled. And we only had 2.5 staff in the budget section, where 6 are budgeted. And similar in other OMB sections, the Navajo government overall has over 1,500 vacancies. At one time, it was close to 2,000. So that's where I'm saying that all of the work involving the budget was affected and compromised somewhat by the fact that there wasn't enough people to handle all of it in a timely way. The solution would be to fill most, if not all, of the vacancies. So all entities, because it's not just OMB. It's literally every division, every program and branch. So that they're all better staffed and carry out budget responsibilities, not only budget responsibilities, but all responsibilities and work. Number 4, confusion occurred on whether to include external funds in the budget. Differing advice was given, which contributed to confusing and then slowing the budget process. And that one, just to refresh your memory about it, initially in the BIM, in the new appendix, there was language to the effect that external funds don't need to be reported anymore because they're not appropriated, they're not budgeted, they're just for information. But when it came to the Legislative Council's office, the Chief Legislative Council issued instructions to the committees and also to the various divisions for their oversight hearings, which included external funds. So I recall I was called to go and speak at a couple of division directors meetings, and I said, you don't have to do external funds. But then that set of instructions came out from the legislative side. So we had to meet controller, myself, DOJ, and Chief Legislative Council, and decided to include it as best we could. So that confusion was there. So the solution is that leadership should decide how to address external funds in the annual budgeting process. Over 70% of the total funds available to the government are external funds. And these budgets need more attention. So having said that little piece there, the Appropriations Act Committee that I just spoke about, the work group, is also looking at this. So soon, in a matter of weeks or a couple of months, minimally, we would have some recommendations on the subject. So, Madam Chair, that's this particular report.
Thank you, Mr. Vial. Thank you for being patient with all of the change that's happened this year, and we look forward to continue working with you through this new year. Committee members, do we have a motion to accept today's report?
Motion.
Vice Chair Carl Slater, motions to accept the recap of FY 2024 budget by Mr. Vial. Do we have a second to accepting the report?
Second.
Delegate Azar seconds the accepting the report. Vice Chair Carl Slater, I believe you do have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. When I look at the inclusions and recommendations, number one, where you provide solution, proper planning, I disagree with this. I think there is proper planning that went into this one, but the limitations and the things they identify in 2, 3, and 4 are what led to the delays, and primarily it's the low staffing at OMB, and I think it's a non-controversial word. The president and a lot of the people there, or at least the president being new to the navigation government and not knowing how to do a budget. So, you know, I don't know how we can plan any better. You know, starting to ring the bell beginning of next year and saying, you know, we need a BIM, we need X, Y, and Z to get things going. So if you want to start that process sooner, and you mentioned this Appropriations Act Committee, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like an internal working group of the executive branch. It'd be good for us to meet in December, and then during the holidays, when we're supposed to be spending time with our families, we can all think about the budget process and how we can hit the ground running come January 2024. But those are a couple comments, and if you have a contact wherever the Appropriations Act Committee is, it'd be great for us to meet with them, since presumably our committee will have something to do with that. On number 3, I still feel like this is the crux of the matter, and I'm not even sure that a 6 is enough for navigation. I mean, I feel like you need to have at least one OMB budget officer for each division, and then maybe have one that's helps with external and internal. But we had asked over this past year, you know, if you can't get staffed up with the ordinary process, if you could contemplate some sort of contract service, and that the committee would be open to funding that. And I just wanted to know if you made any progress in that respect. Because you just cannot do all the things you, I'm saying you as an OMB, not just you, Dominic, but all the things you need to do with the staff that you have. And it's a miracle that we still have an OMB right now, considering like the strain in that office during the budgeting process. So I really want to know that you don't think you're going to be able to get people hired, say by the end of January, then we need to look at how we can get a contract together to bring people on. And maybe it's not a 4-year contract where we bring them on just for half a year to help with the budget process. I don't know exactly what it is, but this is such an important thing. We just cannot go another year without you guys being staffed or having the resources. And I'm happy to do a supplemental funding request, whatever it is, we just need to make it happen. I think that, you know, you got to be in a million different meetings, and then you got to assign staff to do X, Y, and Z, and then they got to tell you, well, actually, I'm already doing A, B, and C, and it just seems to go around and around and around, and there's only so many hours in the day. So I think that's the crux of the matter. And then, you know, in the intelligence that you've gathered in this process and what you do annually, you know, if you think that there are supplemental, either accountant, contract analyst, budget, whatever it is, in the programs, you know, maybe include that in a proposal to the committee or to the controller to the president's office of how, okay, well, we need these people in OMB, but if we're gonna do a contract, we might as well add in these positions at NDOT and add DPM and whatever to help fulfill budget duties. And they can serve under the chain of command of the division, and then you'll have your officers who serve under your chain. But I think we just need to think of something completely new at this point. If we're not going to get the staff members in place by, again, I think the end of January is really or do or die. The last thing I want to bring up is related to personal life savings fund allocations. I got to express my displeasure that, and again, I think this just comes back to staffing. You guys can't be everywhere at once, but I'm sure as you're aware now, there's funding that was set aside for a workforce transformation initiative, and a good portion of that was to be allocated to the, Department of Education and Scholarship section. And that funding was erroneously put into the scholarship assistance line item. And scholarships are starting to be pushed out the door instead of on this workforce transformation initiative. And scholarships are good, but we know we're just subsidizing the economic development off the Navajo Nation. It's a fraction, probably percent of people who actually come back to Navajo Nation and serve the Navajo Nation or develop economic activity in the Navajo Nation. The purpose of this workforce transformation was to try and, well, I don't need to sell it right now, but the point is, I'm sure I've met with OPVP, but there was that, there was funding for, the store and round, the trading post in Round Rock, and then matching dollars to the state allocation, to order to figure out veterans center. Those are things I'm gonna want to keep with you and, the program later on, to make sure that they were budgeted appropriately. You know, there's an exhibit to the legislation that expressly identifies what those allocations are meant for. Then there's the text of the legislation that just listed the business units. And I think when we look at going forward, we need to make sure that OMB is providing appropriate guidance to the programs to ensure that, okay, here's a dollar amount to the business unit and the program, but it's not just $1.1 million for you to choose whatever you want. There's a specific legislative intent behind that. And that was the purpose of the exhibit. So another thing that I think we can look into this next year. I don't need a response on anything right now, aside from if you think you're going to get people staffed up by the end of January, or we can look at this contract thing. And if we're going to look at providing additional resources in the contract, then what is your time frame for, say, developing that sort of thing?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. The only question Vice Chair Slater, I think Mr. Vial, is about the staffing portion of OMB and the overall structure of the executive branch, how the executive branch is that task at OMB. So, Mr. Vial, the floor is yours to respond to the question.
Thank you, committee members responding to Delegate Slater on the since approximately June for sure. June, August, September, for that 3-month period. We were intensely involved in the budget. Really had very little time for anything else, including responding to any applicant referrals for our various positions. So now that all of that's over, we've interviewed a number of applicants for the senior budget analyst vacancies. And we even have one position funded by our ARPA budget. And both of those applicants, I'm happy to say, look good. So I think we're gonna hire them real soon. The budget officer is a critical and key position. Likewise, we've interviewed applicants for that position. And I'm going to make a job offer to an individual. The only problem there is the salary. So that's the result so far, at least on the budget side. Now, I can say this, on the contracts and grants side, there's still a number of vacancies. And we're just not getting very many applicants being referred for senior contract analysts. So that's the update on some of the positions. However, I like your idea where you mentioned having designated personnel at the division level and branch level, who we would work with literally daily or as needed, certainly during the budget process. That's a good idea. I remember in days past, a number of years ago, there was, like ASO positions in every division who we would work with on all budget matters. In some cases, the individual, the incumbent, was able to handle external fund matters too, because some divisions are extensively external funds. They're hard to get any Navajo funds. They're external. So we can explore that idea again to see whether we can do it. And again, some of those positions became vacant too. I expressly can maybe use this one as an example. Over at Doty, Department of Education, in the last, 3 years, there's been 2 superintendents, 2 deputy or assistant superintendents. The longtime ASO that was there retired. That was our point person at Doty on budget matters. And they've never refilled that position. They abolished it. So involving some of the recent grants, like council just made appropriations to Navajo Tech and in college. That person used to be involved extensively with those grants, the administration of it and the reporting of their activity and so on. So we would want to initiate that again and go forward with it. And I think that I believe the OPVP, the Office of the President, would support that sort of initiative. So we would, we could use your support when and if necessary to do that, particularly if additional funding might be needed to implement it. Thank you, Delegate Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. Many members, do we have further questions for Mr. Vidal on the report? Delegate Astor, do you have any questions? Delegate Slater, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I'll motion to accept the report and then request there that you include an action item the next time the committee meets with the president, or if you meet with the president on, say it's in one of the.
Okay.
Because the president's office is going to be the maker. They're either going to support it and make it happen, or they're going to be wrong.
Right. I believe, well, Ms. Nelson, do we have an original motion? The original motion was vice chair and the second party was Delegate Astor. Okay. Before we go into the question. Yeah, then I think the time over to you to ask your question. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, okay, thank you, Mr. Vial. We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Vial, I just wanted to extend my appreciation again. Thank you for working with the committee. We look forward to working with the Office of Management and Budget and also with the Office of the President and Vice President on the direction of the budgeting process for the Navajo Nation. In addition to the Vice Chair's request for the action item for discussing how to better resource the Office of Management and Budget, I also wanted to commit to the committee that that we will be hearing from the Office of Management and Budget how the budget instructional manual is being implemented on a quarterly basis. So I know we're coming up to the end, or we're in the first quarter of this fiscal year, but I think it's to the committee's benefit if we hear from the Office of Management and Budget the challenges that are being heard from at OMB about this current BIM, and so how we can better prepare for the next BIM. So just so that it's a continued discussion instead of just the discussion we're waiting for when the development comes. So we're going to continue to hear from the Office of Management and Budget on the implementation of the budget instructional manual that was passed by our committee this past year, and also we're going to hear from the Appropriations Committee. I know that is a newly developed internal working group. I have not formally, I don't know who's formally directing the group, but we look forward to identifying the point of contact. And I think whoever the point of contact is to be called, and whoever's listening online, I think it might be Dana from the legislative branch. That will be working with, Peggy Nakai on working with that conversation and communication with the committee. So with that, we do have a motion and a second to accept the report. No further questions. Ms. Nelson, can you do a roll call vote to accept today's report?
Yes.
Okay, Delegate Azarick votes green to accept the report. Vice Chair Carl Slater votes green. And we are receiving speaker statement. Speaker David. Speaker David, how do you vote?
I will agree.
He votes
I will
green
agree.
to accept the report about the FY 2024 budgeting. Process. Thank you, Mr. Bial, for your report today, and thank you for the organization of the report. It's very well read. Thank you. Committee members, we're going to move on to item C, which also Mr. Bial is included in this report. And we're also going to welcome up the interim controller on the universal code related upgrades. I know we've already had a similar discussion, but this report, committee members, is to update the committee on the discussion between OMB and OOC. City knows from OOC, the Office of the Controller had reported to the committee the proposal of the universal budgeting code, and that memo was sent out from the controller almost a month ago. Few weeks ago, but now there is a bit of disagreement on management and budget, and just to make the committee aware, that's why the report is on the agenda. But if the committee chooses, would the committee like to hear this report in oral or written?
Sure.
Vice Chair Slater?
And Delegate Azarick, would you be open to combining G and C? If you have director update you want.
Before we get moving on this item, Mr. Augustine, Justin Augustine, are you on the call? I know you were saying that you couldn't hear the audio.
Yes, Chair, I am here.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. Vice Chair Slater, Mr. Augustine's on the call.
Okay, I would just propose that we start with Mr. McCabe, with Mr. Bial, and then we'll go into Mr. Estes. I think it ties back to the regs and he has updates on that too. So I'm going to motion to, I guess, suspend the floor rules and then the agenda to combine G and C.
The motion is to suspend floor rules to combine report C and G, and they all regard ARPA expenditures, the ARPA expenditure procedure, both at the federal level and the national nation level. So the report is to discuss the process of ARPA dollars being drawn down. Do we have a second to amend the agenda? Okay, Delegate Azarick seconds the motion to suspend floor rules and to amend the agenda. So now the proposed motion is to have 3 presenters on the topic of the drawdown of ARPA dollars through the navigation and an update about the committee members. Okay, Delegate Azarick, you vote green.
Green.
Vice Chair Slater, you vote
Green.
green.
Set.
David.
Vote. Vote. Okay, I vote green.
Delegate David votes green to combine the, report. With that, colleagues, we, suspend floor rules and motion to suspend agenda and we approve the agenda. We're gonna go to the new report, which is, we're gonna start with first, just Mr. McCabe, can you give the committee a recap, and then Mr. Dial, can you provide a response from the office manager budget? And then we'll go into Mr. Ahensky or Mr. Lorraine Sapahi, if she's on the call for legal advice. Mr. McCabe?
Great, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Madam Chair, Parrish. First off, let me apologize for being late this morning. I appreciate you accommodating my tardiness. So let me just kind of rewind back to how this whole process started, which was really internal. And it needs to be said up front that the whole foundation for this was to provide an easier process, more for the chapters to follow on subrecipient agreements, so that there wasn't as much confusion. I did have, before we started the process, I had been in division director meetings where it was communicated that there's a lot of confusion and holdup on the approval of chapter related subrecipient agreements. And I know it's been a priority of this committee and a priority of OPVP to get funds moving to the chapters, as we are running up against deadlines now for projects, et cetera. So having said that, I called together meetings with all affected parties. I invited OMB and Mr. Cordell Shorty was there. I invited contract accounting. I invited DOJ and the Office of the President, Vice President, and the FRF office. And we had at least two, it might have been three meetings where we hashed out how this would work. We hashed out what code would be used. And the idea was to provide one universal object code when the approval process started for subrecipient agreements. And the reason being twofold. One, again, just to speed up the process, get one code in place that the chapters would use on the budget forms for the monies that came down. And one of the benefits and one of those problems we were also trying to solve is, there's been a lot of talk of how subrecipients and the chapters are going to be subject to their own audits with this new money from ARPA. This is something that was confirmed in talking with John Kennedy, that, when we send money down to any subrecipient, being an enterprise like NTUA or the chapters, the money, once it leaves the Navajo Nation, the responsibility for single audit compliance falls on the subrecipient, which would be the chapters, enterprises, et cetera. The Navajo Nation's responsibility at that point would be for subrecipient monitoring, which I'll go over that a little bit with the audit, the 2022 update report, single audit update report. So essentially what my team decided was, if we use a full-on budget object coding system like we were using, we may confuse the audit universe when it comes to the use of ARPA funds. And what I mean by that is, if we budget in our FMIS system, if a chapter's intent for its expenditure plan is to use funds for, say, contractors and then even salaries or all these different object codes, it would look as though the Navajo Nation spent that money on those things, on those object codes, when in fact, what we did is we sent the money to the chapters for them to use the money in those object codes. And so when the auditors come in, what this will provide is the auditors one single universe of monies that went grants to entities. And so that they know that those monies were actually sent with the intent for the chapters to carry out the purpose under a subrecipient agreement. So that was really the logic behind why we would use, and the code that was identified was 8780 grants to entities. And in the meetings that we had, it was agreed upon by all parties. Yeah, let's use that code. FRF was good with the idea. They were the ones mainly, to their credit, pushing a simpler process because they need to get the money out the door. DOJ agreed with it. We had Mr. Rodas, I think, and Ms. Catherine Belzowski as well as part of those meetings. And we also had OMB, and we all agreed on it. And subsequent to that, I issued a memo on September 21st spelling out this process. And really a request to Mr. Bial and his office to utilize this code. At that point, Shinata, I thought we were all on the same page. I thought we were ready to move forward and really start pushing SRAs out the door. I am happy to report that we are pushing SRAs out despite this. However, there has been some confusion now since the September 21st memo. And a memo, I think, or an email that came back from OMB saying budget revisions were necessary. Because the other factor in this was SRAs that had already been approved. And so we had asked in the memo that we move all existing budgets that for SRAs that were already approved into this one object code. And I think what came back from OMB was if we're going to do that, we need to utilize the budget revision forms, which honestly, I don't really have an issue with. If that's the process, that's the process. But then the confusion also came up with, should we be using code 8780, which is a level of detail 6 code, or 8785, which is a level of detail 7 code? And then the back and forth was, well, we budget at level 6, we expend at level 7. Frankly, I got lost in the emails back and forth, and I basically said to FRF, it is what it is at this point. Follow what OMB is wishing. The idea really is to continue to push one universal code. What we're trying to do, Shinata, is really, I think we're notorious at telling chapters, do it this way, and then changing it and telling them to do it another way, and then changing it and telling them to do it another way. And so I think what we're really trying to do is prevent that from happening, because there's hundreds of millions in dollars of these chapter appropriations that just are stuck. And it should be also noted that the SRA agreements, the chapter can choose whether or not they want to go into a subrecipient agreement. If they do, we're asking them to utilize this code. If they don't, then it'll follow the same budget process as it was before, because we'll be the administrators at that point of the money. We're not sending it as a subrecipient distribution. It'll be administered by DCD or other programs, depending on who the administrative oversight is. So really, this only applies to current and future chapter related, well, any subrecipient agreement. We've actually had this conversation with NTUA, telling them you should follow the same process. And part of this also is we were working with OMB to come up with a universal reporting form, because really our responsibility when monies go out to these subrecipients, be it chapters or enterprises, we are responsible to monitor that, and we had audit findings on it. So we really need to shore this up. We had audit findings on it even before we really started sending these monies out. So now that we're going to really ramp this money up to the chapters, et cetera, we need to make sure the process is right. And so in my memo, I asked that we work with Dominic and his team to come up with that universal reporting form. And the idea was to mirror it with the reporting requirements in the Treasury portal, because we're required to report to the Treasury every quarter. Money's expended, money's appropriated, et cetera. So that part of it, we haven't got to meet yet with Dominic, but we look forward to getting that done. And the idea is just a 1 or 2 page reporting system where chapters can utilize a universal report to report expenditures, compare that to the budget, and then we would require them to staple the MIP accounting reports behind it so that we can reconcile it. And we're hoping that that leads to, and my team on the contract accounting side agreed that that would be much easier for them to report to Treasury. And we did have reporting issues in our audit last time as well. So I think the whole idea behind this is noted before and mentioned in the memo, and I do believe I CC'd all of you in the memo. Yeah, honorable members of the Budget and Finance through Peggy Nakai. So I'm hoping you saw this. I did email it last week before this meeting was rescheduled too, so I'm hoping you got it then. But the idea again was to really just kind of hopefully simplify this and also bring together the correct audit universe of expenditures to subrecipients and then work with Dominic's team to figure out a universal reporting process. But again, somewhere between the memo and now, there was some disagreement, maybe some confusion. And I do know Justin has some updates that might help with some of this as well, as far as how we administer subrecipients, et cetera, with this recent conversation with the Treasury. But with that, I'll end there, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and I guess hear from Mr. Bial and Justin. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Tapahi, are you on the call? Mr. Tapahi, are you on the call?
I am. Can you hear me?
I think,
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. It did go in and out earlier.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were on the call. In case we're gonna talk about the enabling legislation, I just want to make sure you're on.
Interim controller. As to start with, as Mr. McCabe mentioned, there was meetings on the subject matter, the universal object coding, where in our office, I think you realize by now, the contracts and grant sections, the contracting officer and deputy contracting officer, they are the ones who work with external funds exclusively. So they work with all these ARPA projects. So they were in attendance at the meetings that he's talking about. So I was hoping the deputy contracting officer would be here. So, but nevertheless, I'll explain my understanding of the subject. The memorandum that Mr. McCabe sent to myself, talking about using the 8780 object code grants to entities. That part of it is fine. The only question we would have about it is, I don't know why they use entities, because there is a series of object codes exclusive to chapters. So, but it doesn't matter, I guess. It's the accounting of it apparently from the controller side is okay. OMB doesn't do that, so that's all I can say about that. The memorandum from the controller also says that OMB is asked to conduct the budget transfers of ARPA-related SRA projects already entered. That's probably the area where we had the most difficulty because, checks and balances and so on and so forth. OMB, the way we view this is OMB should not be doing both the budget transfers and then approval of the budgets as well at the same time. It was our understanding that that's what the FRFO office was created to do. So in discussion with Mr. Platero, he agreed. So that's how it's working now. So it's not just OMB doing all of it. FRFO office has that responsibility to work with the ARPA budgets and so forth. And they're doing it. So that was probably the main issue there. The other contributor, it's not a critical matter on this particular subject, but the understanding I'm told by Mr. Shorty and Mr. Shorty and Mr. Jones from my office is that either the controller's office or the FRFO office was going to provide a listing of all the LGA certified chapters who would qualify for this activity. And up to recently, I think that information wasn't available to us. So all I say about that is just contributed somewhat to some of the delay. So that's my response on the subject matter. Again, as Mr. McCabe mentions, his memo goes on the second page and a bit more to talk about the monitoring and reporting activity. As he said, we haven't met on it, but obviously it is our concern as well. I think Mr. Shorty has mentioned a number of times that one of his great fears is that with this ARPA funding, not only ARPA, but others, but ARPA's the subject at the moment, is we need to be careful how we administer it, how we account for it, and how we report for it. So I agree with Mr. McCabe that we do jointly need to meet on the subject along with the FRFO office and be on the same page as far as that goes, to protect and carry out the duties of our respective offices. And of course, the great name of the Navajo Nation. Chair, that's my response.
Thank you, Mr. Bial. Mr. Augustine, are you on the call?
Yes, Chair, I am on the call.
Okay, Mr. Augustine, you've heard from the Office of the Controller and the Office of Management and Budget, some of the discussion, the current discussion on SRAs on the Navajo Nation level, and as the committee amended the agenda to include you into this discussion, Mr. Augustine, could you also provide the committee an update from the federal government on SRAs and taking discussion from the United States Treasury regarding the ARPA dollars?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair Parrish and Vice Chair Slater, as well as members of the Budget and Finance Committee for the 25th Navajo Nation Council. So just to kind of recap on some of the major discussions that have been going on over the last few weeks. So the United States Treasury has expressed concerns with the Navajo Nation's expenditure rate for the Fiscal Recovery Fund dollars. Right now, we are at about 51% of either expended or obligated funding. President Nygren met with Treasurer Malerba on October 6th of this past month. And during that discussion, the treasurer requested a plan from the Navajo Nation and has committed their resources to meet monthly to ensure that all of these funds are obligated by the statutory deadline and the internal statutory deadline with the Navajo Nation. Through those discussions, one of the items that we had identified was the confusion in the subrecipient agreements and whether or not, once a subrecipient agreement is signed, if those funds are considered obligated. So on October 25th, President Nygren sent a letter to the US Treasury indicating that Section 9901C of the American Rescue Plan Act states that tribal governments and other state and local fiscal recovery fund recipients could utilize those funds for costs incurred by December 31 of 2024 and requested additional guidance on a few items. Those items include issues relating to the administrative cost or the indirect cost rate for employees who would be funded, but obviously in order to perform closeout activities, we would still need personnel. And the way that the rules are written now, or the way that the policies are written, would suggest that the tribes would have to front that money through the general funds in order to perform any closeout activities, because closeout wouldn't be expected until the last year of the funds, which would be past the December 31st, 2024 deadline. So what we had requested from Treasury was guidance. And through my discussion with Treasury, they're actually in the process of modifying policies to help address those concerns, because this is not the only concern that has been brought to them by tribes. So what we had discussed and what the letter that was sent out on October 25th had requested was the Treasury review its policies under the American Rescue Plan to consider subrecipient agreements that tribes have engaged in as obligated for the funding that has been already received. Again, under the current language, the interpretation is a cause for concern because these agreements may not be considered as obligated, which would create some additional obstacles in our ability to fully and effectively utilize the funds before the statutory deadline of December 31st, 2024, and the internal Navajo Nation deadline in June. The president and the vice president are working diligently to ensure that these ARPA funds are allocated to a variety of projects that will benefit the communities within the Navajo Nation. And again, the second issue that we really wanted the Treasury to understand was that the indirect cost rates for salaries and benefits for all FRF positions need to be adjusted so that those costs could be charged after the obligation deadline of December 31st. And I believe that that is the same understanding and that the controller has in terms of how these funds should be obligated. And I think Treasury understands it, and it's just an unintended consequence of how the rules were written. So Treasury is fairly close into addressing that and should have guidance out within the next few weeks. And we'll continue to have those discussions with them and update the controller's office, as well as OMB and the Budget and Finance Committee on those ongoing discussions. But there has been a monthly meeting that has been established. I believe our next meeting is November 14th. And we have invited members of the Controller's Office, the Department of Justice, the Budget and Finance Committee as well. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a report and stand ready for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Alpestein. Thank you, Mr. McCabe and Mr. Vial for your report today. Committee members, do we have a motion to accept today's report? Delegate Everett, motion to accept the report. Second. Vice Chair Carl Slater, second the motion. Committee members, do we have any questions from Mr. Alpestein, Mr. McCabe, or Mr. Vial? Vice Chair Carl Slater.
Thank you. So it sounds like with the subrecipient agreements related to the chat, there's things, but we're waiting guidance from Treasury on whether in principle all the subrecipient agreements, whether it's chapters or into it, or whatever, will obligated. When you don't have confirmation yet.
Any other questions, Vice Chair?
I guess second, previously the revenue assumption, right, that they would count as obligated,
The other way.
but they would not count as
They
obligated, so it wouldn't count as obligated. They could obligate funds themselves, it's not, they reflect that, okay, that's,
Yeah, Vice Chair.
thank you. Mr. Austin, do you know when we're gonna hear from them? Is this gonna be like in a month or like in less than a month from Treasury? And then second, I guess, Controller or Mr. Deal, are you aware of any discussions or proposals that are happening out of the FRF President's office about how, if we do receive an affirmative response saying that these count as obligated or encumbered, that we would change how we're devising the deployment of the FRF? Because, well, I think you'll understand why.
I'll turn the time over to Mr. Offenstein and then Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Vice Chair Slater, for that question. So in my discussion with Treasury last week, they said that they were very, very close and they requested the Navajo Nation support in adopting that policy change, which is why we sent out the letter. So I will follow up with Treasury today and I can get you a concrete answer, but I expect it, probably before Thanksgiving, hopefully. But I will confirm with Treasury and get back to you with a more solid answer.
Thank you, Mr. Offenstein, Mr. McCabe. Vice Chair said that.
I saw that. Otero sent out, updated treasury guidance. I haven't had time to read that. I don't know what date that came out. But you reviewed it. Does it have anything in the subsection? No. So the first question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair Parrish, Vice Chair Slater for the question and members of the committee. Yeah, thank you. So is that one. To answer, first off, to address, to answer your question and address, I offer my apologies to Mr. Vidal on the budget transfer side. He's right, we need to follow the process. I think where I got a little bit confused is during our meetings, it was agreed that the way we were doing it was fine, and that's why I issued the memo. The Office of the Controller wants to work with OMB and whatever process we need to follow for the existing SRA budget transfers. Also, Mr. Bial is correct. There was to be a listing provided on the eligible chapter SRA agreements plus the existing ones, but that was actually supposed to come from FRF. And it sounds like maybe they have gotten that recently. But Delegate Slater, you're right. I think we're given this conversation. I think we're all on the same page now. The question of are we aware of discussions at OPVP regarding SRA agreements? No, there aren't any really on that. What I do know is we have meetings every other week on ARPA, but it's more to try and identify potential projects that may not realistically be done by the dates, the drop dead dates for the not only the appropriation or the obligation, but also the expenditure of the money. As you know, we have an internal deadline of June 30th, 2024 to obligate all the funds, and then we have the federal deadline of December 31st, 2024 to obligate it. Then we have the internal deadline of June 30th, 2026 to actually expend it. And then the federal deadline is December 31st, 2026. So to answer your question, like I said, there really are no discussions on chapter SRAs. I think we're just working to get that money out as quickly as possible. But there are discussions going on right now, really trying to identify projects that may not realistically be completed and then potential reallocation. I will just comment real quick on the work that Mr. Alhasteen just reported on. I did have a chance to talk with him about his conversation with Treasury. He did forward me the memo that the president eventually signed. I totally concurred with it. And the developments that he's talking about are potentially significant for us and in our favor. The usage of the indirect cost rate is a good thing for us. Also, the discussion on the SRAs being obligated when sent to the chapters is good for us as well. Because before that, it was considered not obligated until the money was actually deployed and spent. So I think this is a good thing on our end, but it still, I think, emphasizes the importance of what Mr. Bial spoke to, and that's our responsibility to monitor those funds to the chapters to make sure they're not only expending it for the purpose that we have approved, but expending it timely and not creating any audit issues. Because ultimately, the chapters are responsible that spend $750,000 or more in any given fiscal year are responsible for the single audit. However, in practice, if those monies aren't administered properly by the chapters, at the end of the day, the Navajo Nation will most likely be on the hook if any money needs to be returned. So we need to really take our monitoring responsibilities as seriously as we can. And that's something that Mr. Bial reflected in his report as well. So I hope that answered your question, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Vice Chair Slater, do you have any follow-up questions? No. Committee members, do we have any questions for the presenters today? Second call. Third call. Hearing none, Ms. Hassan, do you do a roll call vote to accept today's report?
Yes, I'm in chairman Como and accepting the report. Vice Chair, how do you vote? Okay, Laura, was green, Arbo Adams, Block Party, how do you vote? Carter was green, thank you. Thank you, Arbo Adams, Block Party was green, Arbo separated, how do you vote?
I will be.
Thank you, Arbo second was green, Arbo Slater, how do you vote? Thank you, Arbo was green, Madam Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, they're opposing, Madam Chair not voting, and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Melton. Thank you, Mr. Vial, Mr. McCabe, and Mr. Ahasi for the time to report an update about SRA status and expenditure of ARPA dollars. Committee members, we're going to move on to the next report, which is a single audit update from the interim controller, Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Parish members of the 25th, Budget and Finance Committee of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Before I get started, I know in prior updates on the single audit, we went into executive session, so I would ask the committee's advice on how to handle that, especially my intent is to give a overall summary, but also kind of go a little bit, well, not in depth, but really kind of talk more about the findings that were included in the report. And I know in the past, when we got to that, it was executive session. So I guess I would ask that we go to executive session during the findings, but also your advice on how to handle it, Madam Chair.
Mr. McCabe, committee members, the controller has advised us that this may reporting take place in executive session. I'm just gonna offer that to the committee if anybody would like to look into executive session.
I would say, let's start the non-executive part and then after control of the telecom, we go to the executive session.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Let's turn the time back over to Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Slater. So I sent, did you all get the slideshow that I sent last week? Yeah, perfect. So the topics we're going to talk about today really is the purpose. Well, I'll start just a brief overview of the purpose of the single audit report. As the Budget and Finance Committee is aware, we issue basically 3 separate reports, but 2 reports are contained in the single audit. One is in the financial statement audit. We did issue the financial statement piece of the audit significantly earlier than the single audit report. We were able to get the financial statement audit completed and issued in August. which was still late on the June 30 timeline, but it is actually, I think we issued that in July. That went to Navajo Nation Council, was approved. It was instructed to me that typically the Navajo Nation only approves the financial statement portion of the audit, as it is a required piece to start the budget process or to continue the budget process. So that happened a couple months ago. The results of that audit were as to be expected than what we normally have, which was our talked about gap departures. But new to this year was our departure from GASB 87, which is a lease issue that really should have been handled probably a couple of years ago. And I do know the prior controller was working to implement a software program that would help us vet GASB 87. And I kind of inherited that back in April when I came in. I do believe we RFP'd it, vetted it. I think we made a selection. The good news is I did talk to John Kennedy and his team on this, and it might be something that we can actually resolve and make some entries to correct the 2023 fiscal year and hopefully remove it as an exception on the financial audit report for this year as opposed to next year. So the report that was issued subsequent to the financial statement audit was the compliance audit, the governmental audit, which is primarily geared toward vetting our compliance with federal regulations on the administering of federal funds, and also our testing of controls over compliance. So slide 3 gives you just a brief kind of idea of what that means. What the auditor will do is they'll come in, they'll make a selection of what they call major programs. Technically, any program that expends $750,000 or more in a fiscal year are eligible for selection as a major program for test work. That doesn't mean the auditor will test every single one over that threshold. In our case, we have such a large CFA that they actually adjust that number from 750 to 3 million. They do a risk assessment, so it's important that we understand that the auditor will do a risk assessment on type A, what we call type A and type B major programs. Our threshold for type A programs was $3 million in expenditures or more. They are required to test what we call high risk type A programs, which I believe we had several. And then if we don't reach a certain coverage of the CFA, which is 40%, then they're required to also vet low risk type A programs and high risk type B. Type B being any program that expended 3 million or less. Overall, I do have a slide on how many major programs they selected and tested, but just really giving the committee an idea of how those programs are selected. They don't by any means test every single one of our programs. It would take forever and cost us even more than we're already paying for the audit. On the compliance report, there is an opinion given, so they will tell us you're either materially in compliance or not in compliance with the major programs tested. And I'll go through those summaries here in a second. And then the other part of the single audit requirements is the testing of the controls over compliance. Typically what happens is the auditor will do what we call a dual test of controls and compliance, meaning they'll select a sample from the major programs. That sample can be really anywhere from 2 or 3 to 100, depending on the risk assessment. They'll select a sample, they'll test them both for what we call compliance attributes. And those are all based on the compliance supplement that the Office of Management Budget on the United States level puts out. Allowable costs, allowable principles, allowable cost principles, allowable activities are among the 2 biggest ones. And they go all the way down to eligibility, subrecipient monitoring, reporting, depending on the program. Not all of those requirements apply to every program, but they do test the ones that do apply to the programs that they selected. In this example, they do not give an opinion on the report. They just test our controls over compliance, and then they tell us what they find. They will split the findings of internal control deficiencies into 2 categories. The first one being significant deficiencies. That category is the category that basically tells the Navajo Nation, these are issues, You should look into them, you should correct them, but they don't rise to the level of probable material non-compliance. So those are the ones that we and OOC definitely give attention to, but it's the second category that's called material weaknesses that really we need to fix as quickly as possible, because really what the auditor is telling us with material weaknesses is here's a finding. If it's not fixed, it could lead to future material non-compliance on your reports. And we had several of those this year, and I'll summarize those here in a bit. The next slide you see, it's actually titled changes made and started, but it actually should be titled the opinions. Actually, this slide shouldn't even be in here. I'm not sure why it's in there. Go to the next slide, the number 5 slide, which is the opinion slide. So just real quickly, the reported CFA for 2022, we had $987 million in reported federal expenditures. So as Dominic was mentioning earlier, when it comes to external funds, being 70% of our revenue source, it's close to $1 billion that we not receive, but we expend in any given year. And our CFA this year reported close to $1 billion, 987 million on the federal expenditures. Our type A threshold, as calculated by the auditors, is 3 million. Because of the size of the expenditures that we have, they actually do a calculation. So they don't consider type A programs at the 750 normal threshold. They can move that up based on the amount of expenditures. So the type A threshold for the Navajo Nation for 2022 was 3 million or above. From that and their risk assessments, they selected 15 major programs to be tested. Of those 15, 4 got unmodified opinions. That's what's otherwise known as a clean opinion, meaning we were in material compliance in those 4 programs with federal regulations. 10 of the programs got qualified opinions. Qualified opinions could be thought of as what we call an except for opinion, meaning the program was in material compliance except for this one area, and they'll identify the area. So out of the 15 major programs tested, 10 had qualified opinions. And then unfortunately, out of the 15 major programs tested, we had 1 adverse opinion. And that means we were in material non-compliance with the program. I can go over the details of that, but most likely in an executive session of which program that was and the reasons. I think probably at this point, Madam Chair, is where we may want to go into executive session, because I'll be giving you the major findings summary, and then maybe come out after that and I can explain the process to correct going forward.
Thank you, Mr. McKeon. Committee members, the advice from the controller and also from Office of Legislative Counsel is to enter into executive session. Would the committee like to enter into executive session to hear the specific findings?
Yes.
Vice Chair Crowe, later motions to enter into executive session for how long?
Well, let's hear the questions. But I'll only take.
I'm gonna say 20 minutes.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, I do, okay, we have Vice Chair later has to leave at 12, and I have that delegate team and also has to leave this afternoon too. So, we may break it down at 12 o'clock, just for an announcement to the committee. So with that knowledge, Vice Chair, are you going to stay with 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion to enter into the executive session? Second call for the motion. Third call?
I'll just motion to accept the report.
Okay. Vice Chair Slater also modifies his motion to accept the report as given by. Do we have a second to accept the report? Delegate Abbott seconds the report to accept the report from Controller. Okay. All right. Committee members, we have any questions on the report? Second call for questions. Third call. Hearing none, Ms. Nelson, can you please give a roll call vote to accept the report? Interim report.
Yes, I'm Madam Chair, with my whole participating report, Laura, how do you vote? Thank you, Martha votes green, Honorable Counselor, how do you vote? Thank you, Honorable Counselor votes green, Honorable Applicant Block, how do you vote? How do I vote green? Thank you. Thank you, David, Honorable Applicant Block, how do you vote green? Honorable Counselor, how do you vote? Madam Chair, we have three members voting in front of the opposing, and two members not voting, and Madam Chair not voting, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Thank you, Mr. McCabe, for doing your report today. We're going to move on to the next item, which is an update on Navajo Veterans Administration housing. Ms. Bobby Baldwin is not here, but Ms. Baldwin did leave the committee written report, which is in binders next to the website. Committee members, would we like to accept the written report, or would we like to defer it or move on to the next item?
Yeah, I'll listen to further reports from that. Yeah, the further reports from next.
Later, are there any other reports to defer to the next agenda?
No, we have time to do it.
Okay. Committee members, the motion is to do.
Actually, I'll look at page E.
To defer the update on Veterans Housing Administration housing and for the part that as determined for legislation number 02-303. Those two reports are current motion is to defer that to the next agenda. Committee members, do we have a second to the motion? Motion is to defer the Veterans Administration and the eligible cost determination legislation report to the next agenda. Do you have a second? Okay, Delegate Hazard, second to the motion. Committee member or Miss Nelson, can we do a roll call vote? Motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, will come vote on the motion. Margaret Ashford, how do you vote?
Right.
Thank you, Margaret, Margaret Ashford, votes green, Honorable Applicant Block, how do you vote? Thank you, say the Honorable Applicant Block, votes green. Honorable Slater votes green, and the first statement. Madam Chair, we have three members voting in the affirmative or opposing, and Chair not voting, and two members not voting against.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson and committee members. We're gonna go to the next report, which is from the Division of Community Development on the update for health fund and our expenditure. Mr. Wistetta and also Mr. Delgado, is the Division of Community Development. There are Mitchell also. Oh, is anybody reporting to the Division of Community Development on that report? You can come up to the, starting in the box.
He was on the call earlier. I can see that. Tom's on the call. Yeah.
The number of projects. No, just the veterans and then so DPD.
I don't see.
Welcome.
Marvin, who was on the call earlier.
Is it just Mr. Dogeye? All right, Mr. Dogeye.
Well, that and, the bigger presentation.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Jonga. Thank you for being here. We are. Mr. Jonga. Next one is our listening to Doug on the housing funds. And Mr. Rosetta, and Mr. McKellen, on the call. Mr. Doug. I'm gonna do it first call. Mr. Arvin Mitchell, are you on the call? Second call from Mr. Arvin Mitchell. Finish time over to Mr. Rosetta, Mr. Daughter.
Okay, good morning. BNF members, Patrick Delgan here, Donensley Topanch, Sanjikini Bashin, Torichini Bashachero, I'll go ahead and cover the housing funds. On the agenda here, this was going to cover the ARPA FRF funds that Division of Community Development, Community Housing Infrastructure Department is administering. Also mentioning Mr. Arvin Mitchell couldn't attend today due to family emergency. So I'll go ahead and cover the housing funds with the CHID department. You have PowerPoint handout, and we've been sharing this information with other meetings, other update meetings that we've had in the past few weeks. And just want to mention that Community Housing Infrastructure Department slides are towards the middle of the presentation. And I'll cover the status right now on how far along the community housing infrastructure is on the housing. So as at the beginning of the year, I mentioned before that we've completed application intakes for all 24 delegate in their chapter regions. We've done home site assessments based on the applications we received. We are finishing up Western Agency chapters. We should be complete by next week. There are some chapters that we have to revisit due to some of the applicants not being available. And my field staff were there to conduct home site assessments. So, but overall, we're about 90 to 95% complete with home site assessments. And once these home site assessments are complete, we're compiling and developing the final reports for each chapters and prioritizing the applicant lists. Based off this applicant list, we'll prioritize the applicants and provide our selection based off this priority list on the need for these applicants. Again, the criteria is that we are serving applicants who are in need of a new home due to burnout, due to dilapidated homes, overcrowding, or just being homeless without, they have a home site lease, but with no home on their home site lease. Also, we've taken into consideration all of the information that were included in the application itself during the online portal. So once those are complete, we'll set up meetings, schedule meetings with the delegates and their respective chapters and go over the priority list to ensure confirmation that we move forward with the priority list and begin the including them in a procurement and contract to receive housing. As far as the contract and the procurement is going right now, we have drafted up a RFP, and this RFP is going to be similar to an IDIQ RFQ. IDIQ,
Oh,
indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity contract. And we felt that this will be a good route to take. Reason is once we're done with ARPA dollars by the end of December 26th, there's a possibility of additional homes and other funding coming into Community Housing Infrastructure Department for housing requests. So we're including other agency funding in this RFQ, IDIQ, and we want to make it for 5 years. That way we're also going to include types of homes in this RFQ, which is wood frame, stick-built homes and modular homes. So that is the RFQ that we've drafting up right now. We hope to get this advertised and out by next week, by the end of next week, and have some contractors, vendors bid on this RFQ. So that's where we're at right now with the 50 million ARPA dollars. And we're also going to include the housing improvement programs, BIA ARPA funding of 9.9 million into this RFQ. So we believe that we can possibly of doing more housing beyond ARPA. And if we get the funding to do more homes beyond ARPA, and then also, if necessary, moving and continuing on with the IDIQ contract for future projects. So that is our plan, and we're currently working on that now. Also in your handouts, again, we have funding resources right now with the nation, with EIA, with ICDBG, and also the ARPA dollars. Going down the slide, we have also like to mention just some challenges that we encounter when during this whole process. One is just repetitive questions that we have with chapters when they call in or they request for a meeting. It seems like there's constant scheduling of meetings almost every week, every 2 weeks. So that kind of prevents us from moving forward with some of our assignments and getting this contract and the ARPA funding through and obligated. The other is challenge 2 is the lack of home site leases. Again, we do this funding does require that the applicant does have a approved home site lease. We are still encountering applicants without completed home site lease. We've been working with the chapters to work with the applicants and completing the home site lease before the contract is final and executed. So whoever's ready to go with their required information, home site lease, and they have all their supporting documents, so we're moving forward with the contract. So we've informed the chapters and some of the delegates on this concern. And then also trying to obligate these dollars. We don't want to have these funds reverted back, and we feel that the need for housing is very well a priority and a need out there for our constituents. So those are some of the challenges I just wanted to mention. And so a timeline is we would like to have this RFQ completed and have contractors and vendors provide their bids. We'll conduct evaluations on these bids and do a selection of possibly try to get maybe 3 or 4 contractors or vendors selected, so that way we have a variety of availability, capacity to build homes. So that's our intention, and we're looking at really by the end of this year or early part of next year in January. So this timeline we're looking at, no, for sure by the end of by the next year January. There was some minor setbacks on the RFP. There was some inconsistencies as far as the type of homes that constituents leadership wanted to build or to purchase. So we finally came to an agreement and conclusion that we'll go ahead and do an IDIQ contract for these housing, so which would be, I think, beneficial. So that's what I have for the housing funding right now under the 50 million. And so I can leave that open now for questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delzai, for the report. We also have the presentation in front of us. Do we have a motion to accept today's report? Okay, Vice Chair Carl Slater, motion to accept the report. Do you have a second? Mr. Davis seconds the motion. Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. First question is, I was under the understanding that the request was proposal for some sort of, I think it was, yeah, request for proposal had already been issued in relation to the housing, and I guess going back even farther than that, I mean, I think we had a conversation probably 2 years ago at this point, and we were looking into how to do this. The analysis at this time was modular would make the most sense from procurement and installation or competitive perspective. And then the new president made public pronouncements that he was not going to engage in modular home construction, instead wanted to move forward with stick-built construction in order to employ the maximum amount of Navajos or something like that. And I can understand the wisdom there, but I still don't understand where things are, because I understood that there have already been proposals that have been submitted to the nation under procurement for the $50 million, and that it sounds like we're now moving forward with a different procurement option. So I want to get some clarity on that. And then we did mention stick built again, and I want to ask if what sort of feasibility now has been conducted to confirm that we can construct, you know, the number of homes that we're desiring to construct within our time constraints, and then using the stick built methodology. And then lastly, on here it says October 30th, 2023 for getting back together. I think with the regions are talking about the assessments and where things stand. Is that, and obviously we're past October 30th, so what's the new timeline in that?
You Vice Chair.
And oh, sorry, and do we have a total number of homes that we're anticipating to construct at this time? And are you seeking any sort of changes to any statutory requirements that exist in Navajo law?
Mr. Dawes?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Delegate Slater, for your question, Vice Chair. Yes, we did mention RFP being developed in previous months. As I mentioned, there was some inconsistency on the type of homes that I was planning on pursuing. That has changed several times along the way within this year. So we were ready to go with the modular homes, but there was a change in that concept as far as going towards a stick built, and then going back to modular, and now we're back to stick built. So there was several changes from within this year. So now that we have confirmed and got a grasp of what we're looking at and what we want for our Navajo families and the applicants, is going with a more foundation type structured home, as opposed to a manufactured home where it sits on top of the ground and it's just anchored down. So these homes, we think it'll last longer. The structure and the lifespan of these homes. And so we've met and discussed that we'll go ahead and still pursuing the RFP, but now it's not an RFP, it's now an RFQ, just for the fact that we are looking at the type of homes we're going to be building. We're not purchasing modular homes. That was the reason for an RFP, but now that we're constructing, we're doing RFQs. And so we've also decided to make that an IDIQ RFQ. So meaning we'll have several contractors and vendors included in this RFQ, and including ARPA funding for housing, and by December 26th, and also beyond that, continuing with housing with other funding opportunities and other funding sources. So we'd like to make this contract at least a 5-year contract. And the feasibility, we're going to have the contractors take that responsibility, and we're going to include that in the RFQ, that the necessary feasibility of these homes in the location where they're going to be constructed, that they also consider that in their scope of work. Timeline, we're looking at getting this RFQ and the contract hopefully executed by the end of this year or early part of next year in January, and meaning that that would include obligating the funds by within that time. So we're drafting that now with my team, and also with DOJ, also included in having them provide their recommendations. And the total number of homes right now, we have a priority list for each of these chapters for all the applicants that submitted. And we will work with the chapters, and once we get an estimate, once these bids do come in, have an idea of how much a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom will cost, we will know how many homes we can serve per chapter. So each chapter is given a certain amount of dollars through their delegates distribution of 2,083,333. So some delegates have 8 chapters, some have 1. So but at the end, total homes, they should all equal out, you know. The same, amount of homes, once they're all constructed, so. So that's what we're looking at is the number of homes and with the amount of funding available. And the cost estimate, you know, roughly, we're looking at maybe 200,000 per home, possibly. And how many homes can you get? Can we get with that, on the distributed amount to the chapters? Some chapters we're looking at, around 260,000. I think that's for delegates who have 8 chapters. So how many homes can we get with over 200,000? Maybe 1 or maybe 2. So that's what we're looking at as far as the amount of homes. Just would depend on the cost estimate. And then any statutory laws. The only thing is just the home site lease. You know, we're working with federal dollars, and environmental clearance is a priority. It's important that we get those done. So within these home site lease, you know, we have the biological clearance forms and we have the cultural compliance forms, which clears some of the factors as far as environmental goes, and which is what you know, federal dollars require that we must comply with NEPA laws and their statutory, executive, or regulatory requirements. So that's the only statutory laws that I think we must have to comply with. Other than that, we have waivered income and then also the age limit as far as that criteria goes. So with that, that answers Mr. Delegate Slater's question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belgrade. Vice Chair Slater, do you have all questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Thank you, Mr. Seta. From a cost control perspective, is stick built or modular more advantageous? And then in terms of the timeline of construction, usually one of those methodologies is, or construction types is more advantageous. I'd like to hear about that.
Okay. Cost control as far as stick wood frame built homes, it would cost a little more than a modular type home, where modulars are built prefab, delivered on site, and trenched. The site will be trenched for a concrete wall for permanent setting, as opposed to stick built where the trench has to take place, footing, pouring of concrete, stem wall, which is your cinder blocks, then doing your floors, your walls, and then your roof system. So the timeline, it might take longer for a stick built, and the cost will be a little higher with the stick built. We're looking at probably average within this area. We're looking at maybe around $185 to $200 per square foot. As opposed to, you know, your modular, you know, you have those also prefab and brought out on site. You'll require a heavy equipment, some type of a crane to lift these modular homes and put them on the structured stem wall footing, and set and do your infrastructure work, your plumbing, and then your connections. So modular homes, I believe the cost is lower, but the amount of work could be just as much, just about the same. So give or take, you know, a month or a few weeks with construction of modular homes. So that's what I have. So yeah, thank you. They'll get later.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. committee members, before I go to Vice Chair Slater for another follow-up question, do you have any other questions? Vice Chair Slater?
Thanks. So to understand your timeline more clearly, you want to have the contract executed by the end of January. So I assume that means you'll have an RFP done by the end of this month and the course of December for contractors or whatever vendors to respond to it. And then in terms of encumbering funds, has DOJ or the Fiscal Recovery Fund Office talk to you about subrecipient agreements as opposed to different types of contracts, or do you know how you're moving forward with the contract?
Your daughter?
Yes, thank you again for the question, Delegate Slater. The timeline for the contract, yeah, we're looking at finalizing the contract and hopefully have the funds obligated within that time by the end of this year or early in January at the latest. We're moving forward as quickly as we can. I'm clearing my calendar to get this done. It is a priority for my office right now, and also from leadership. And so I don't want to waste any more time. I'm trying to get this out and get my team together and start writing the language and completing it as soon as possible, and hopefully getting construction ready and started by construction season of next year, most likely in February or March. So that way we can start on get these homes taken care of as soon as possible, whether it be modular or whether it be stick-built homes. So we feel that the amount of contractors that we'll get, will somehow, provide more services and more construction capability to get all these homes built within our timeline of December 2026. And so as far as subrecipient agreements to contracts, and we're just going straight with a contract right now. We don't have we believe we do subrecipient agreement, there's no contractors available right now to do any subrecipient agreements to do this type of work. Thank you.
What's your process?
Who made the decision to hold a RFP? What was the justification? It just seems like we're duplicating this whole process that we're going to be working on for years.
Yeah, we have a team meeting with our executive branch and then also our division director, the team that we have right now to build these homes, and we felt that the modular homes were is not what seemed like everybody wanted to pursue. So the justification for doing that was to get stick-built homes out there and more structured and sturdier type homes to the applicants, because we're looking at elders also in particular. We're looking at them mainly, and then also the IDIQ, which I think putting this all together in one could also use beyond ARPA timeline. So that was the decision and justification for permitting the existing RFQ or RFP, which was just modular homes purchase. So, we just felt it. Doing construction, opening it up but still do modular homes. So we felt that including contractors who can build homes, but also help with meeting our demand. So that's why we wrote with the contract RFQ right now.
Thank you, Mr. Duggan. Committee members, do you have any other questions to the report? Second call committee members for questions. Third call.
Question that's, if you're, I know that you're, Mr. Delback, first of all, thank you for coming for the budget finance committee regarding the, I guess appropriated housing funds. There's only a portion of the funds, that's coming down the pipeline is, question that's under each kid or and the other portion is coming from, I guess, the direction from Nation Veterans Administration. My question back to you is that the contract that you're currently bidding out, does that contract currently coincide or with collaboration with the Veterans Administration, or is there a contract that go on a separate RFP or a separate process? That's my question.
Mr. Duggan?
Okay, thank you, David, for the question. We are going separate from VA's RFQ. Reason is Veterans is going towards the RFQ for new housing, and also I think they're also including modular, but theirs is just for ARPA projects and ARPA funded homes. The RFQ I'm doing is going to be like I said, IDIQ, so that's the reason why we're going separate. And we feel that we could do additional housing beyond ARPA. The opportunity is there, so that's the reason for also putting the contract for 5 years. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Chair, my follow-up question, maybe get the response, Mr. Delback. So right now, the current RFQ that you're working on specifically on Beaver Stickville, right? According to your response.
Okay, Stickville and modular.
Great.
Yeah.
Question back to you is that with these stick-built homes, what is the percentage in order for, what's the percentage of the allocated funding to actually going towards stick-built, and what's the percentage that goes modular?
Okay, thank you for the question again. Right now, we are going to meet, we have the final reports done and the priority list. We want to meet with the chapters and the delegates and have that discussion with the chapters. We feel like they want to, some chapters still want to go with homes that are probably less compared, we have to find out what the cost would be. We know modular may be a little less than construction type built homes. So meeting with the chapter and the delegate, we can work and discuss that and say, the chapters may say, we want to go strictly modular homes. We feel that we may be able to serve more families with going this route, or we go with structured built homes, but it will also depend on the feasibility and the work that needs to be done on site for these homes. So, and if we can kind of gauge the what we each location and services or these contracts may be located. Also, we can include geographic ideas. So, and then, Mr. Waseda can also answer to some of that question.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah.
So my question back to you is, how much is your allocation of funding currently right now?
What is-
For ARPA,
What
Yeah.
is the total, in the?
50 million,
Okay,
it's just 50 million, yeah.
Have you talked to a guy by the name of Dwayne Seta? On some guidance to execute $50 million?
Yeah.
And the reason why I tell you this is that this man that's sitting next to you executed probably $200 million. And was working at NHA in a matter of less than a year and a half. To build homes across the whole nation, $200 million when it was gonna get reverted. At that point, I don't know. There was a concept that was developed by Mr. Waseda. I can probably explain that concept. When he went to get the modular homes and build that foundation at Kirsten Homes, it's the NHA model. They were hammering out those modular homes, cranking them out. We only have a little bit of time before these funds get reverted, so I don't know why we're trying to say that we should do stick home. I think at this point, it doesn't matter. The point that matters is the fastest way to execute the plan, and if this is the execute a plan that's specifically for modular homes. I don't know why we're still trying to go back to the chapters and say, you know, why are we giving them that option? Why at this point are we giving that option? Because the option in reality is that if we don't make the deadline, we're getting nothing. So that's my question is what we're moving in that capacity. Why are we still trying to fiddle around? I think there's a roadmap, and I looked at Mr. Waseda's guidance, and I was doing well, because that's his background, it's just whole capacity of trying to make sure to get these funds drawn down. And I just want to know why is that still interesting? Why are we just not saying, okay, this is the plan that we're going to do, this is how we can execute it? And I don't know if that's coming from leadership. Is that coming from leadership? Is that coming from other delegates? Is that coming from the president? To say, you know what, let's go ahead and do this way. When there's already been a roadmap to spend funding. That's been developed, we got on those dollars, so I'm worried about that. You're getting all these different input from leadership, and they're telling you to scratch the original RFP, that's an issue. Second question, the second thing is that I think Honorable Slater said that he asked the question, who was the individual that asked you to pull up was that the president's office? Like your former division director? That concept. We need to keep those individuals accountable too, and if that's the president, where does the president come into this? To execute this plan that's in place. I mean, it's really, it's amazing to know that we can go ahead and execute a ability to hire more individuals across the nation, but in order to execute that ability, it takes time and effort to recruit, hire, and put those individuals together, that teamwork together. And we had that time. We have that time to build a team. It's together. Do 200. Do we have that ability? That's my question.
It's figured was been sent over to Mr. Dogeye and Mr. Weststead to respond after.
Okay, yeah, thank you again, Delegate Damon, for your question and your comments. Yes, we've been working together, Mr. Wasetta and I. He has shared some information and his guidance, putting a plan together, and he's been included in some of these meetings that we've been attending as far as any of the housing projects go. And he's has a background, and we've utilized his knowledge also. And so at this time, I'll go ahead and give some time to Mr. Wasetta to answer some of the questions and his thoughts on the ARPA housing. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I thought I had lunch coming to me. My name is Gwen Lucida, with Capital Projects, as the department manager. Been here around 4 months. I think one of the things that just answer humble Seth Damon and Mr. Carl Slater. In terms of the RFP, the process aspects of it, when they first put it out, we did the preliminary. There was only 3 general contractors, but the general contractors were not of capacity to handle a large amount of a project. So the changes that occurred from the last week, that was a request from executive management through was to change it to RFQ, meaning that's open it up to just to qualification, not proposal, it's qualification. It can be modular, stick build. One of the things that I gave him was history background when we did the 360 homes in Monterey was deliverables. And looking at the different capacities from state of Arizona and New Mexico. So looking at 3 different options, what can be done with the amount of time, with a year and a half, if we get qualified individuals versus just looking at naval preference. So base everything on qualifications, what we're looking at. That's the initial change of that. We want somebody that has a qualification, produce and execute in a year and a half versus somebody that says, giving us a proposal, this is what we're gonna do, but it doesn't execute. So the RFQ will be, the timeline is shortened up. And it's we're gonna retain individuals based on the qualifications and what they can produce. And you're gonna have to establish a team. So if it's Carson Homes, if it's Champion Homes, whatever, or if it's somebody else, they have a sick bill, whatever. They give us that team and they say, we can produce this type of material, this type of here, within this timeline. That is a similar scenario that I've utilized in the past. It has championed a lot of different activities, but one of the things is just the execution process of it. And so it can incorporate the veterans, but we just need to, let's get the qualifications of individual vendors. And those individual vendors, thank you, Governor. Those individual vendors is one thing that we have that we're looking for. The percentage of stick bill, we don't know yet. One of the things that's gonna be from the feasibility, Mr. Delguy has some staff up in Inscription House, Kienta, Ojeto, all of these remote areas. Instead of doing a modular up there, it'd be more sound efficient to use a SIP panel type system where it comes out in panels. Boom. It's similar to what Habitat Humanity is. Everything's there, they just take everything out there on the trailer and erect it within 2 days. Those are based off of qualification, and it's basically looking at that. One of the things that we're looking at is thinking outside the box. We got to get away from the inside the box syndrome and looking at. So this is kind of the approach that we're doing. It's new. It's a new approach, but it's something that sexy word of the day, so to speak, like sustainability. Sustainability was the most sexy word of the day in 5-6 years ago, so this is something that we're gonna be looking at to execute. One of the things is, like I said, the 1.5 years is the obligation of these monies. How can we get them obligated? Looking at there's one of the biggest things that we've already put out there. Every construction industry, we're at the mercy of Canada, Alberta. What happened this year, or the construction industry cost index is already saying that in 2 to 3 years, we're gonna have a shortage on OSB, plywood, and premier timber, because that's imported into the United States, North America.
Yeah.
So that's gonna impact our construction economy. The other changes that we are looking at is getting more control of that, keeping the price down. And this is where hopefully with these, if we get the qualifications, instead of having people coming out of Albuquerque, you have people working on Arizona side, do nothing but Arizona. It reduced transportation costs, which reduce the shipping in terms of materials. But you have more control over that economy aspect that's coming in. I'll leave it with that because we're still in the infant stages. This is the week of the change from last week. But we can give you a brief write-up, what we're anticipating, what's gonna happen, and then timeline that we're looking at, because we have a set time of the first 2 weeks of January to execute the contract, pushing the timeline back to what we're at advertised now. So it's 2.5 months because of, or 1.5 because of holidays. And then travel holidays, Fridays is travel holiday, I found out here. So, but that's kind of where we're sitting at, and that's just kind of the expertise that I'm giving them. I know that you guys, the leadership has struggles with the confidence because of the timeline. I think based on the past experience and some of the information I know, we'll champion this, okay? Without, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you. I hope that information gives you guys some confidence in where we're going and what we're gonna be sitting at. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Waseda, Speaker David?
Thank you. Things said in. So the Navajo Nation then is gonna be obligated to hiring of anybody, if this is, whether it's state or mandated, it's all gonna be contracted out. Okay, all right. I will put that on there.
Any other questions? Do you have any other questions?
I know we're referring to this document here. And I'm looking at the agenda, but are we, it says housing funds and ARPA expenditure rate. So is there a second portion on here? It says streamlining bathroom addition construction IHS. My question is this gonna be presented on today too? Or are we just talking about housing? That's my question.
Thank you, Damon. We earlier the motion to accept the report given, but that part of the report was not given. So Mr. Delgado, I'm gonna turn the time over to you to respond to that question.
Okay, thank you for your question. This handout here is a general PowerPoint slide that we've been sharing with meetings and presentations regarding any ARPA fundings that the division is taking care of right now, and it does include bathroom addition. We have staff who are handling certain areas as far as ARPA projects go. So with bathroom addition, we have another staff in the division that handles that. But just going by the agenda, like Delegate Damon was saying, I was just geared more towards the housing And as far as the expenditure rate, so as far as expenditure rates and what was provided here is what we have so far. But as far as I guess the rate goes, we have some spending taking place in other sections of the ARPA dollars. Now the individual we think would address that is Sheila Draper, who handles pretty much all other sections of the ARPA dollars under the division. So that includes the bathroom addition, any costs in that pertains to the ARPA dollars. Thank you.
Any members, do we have any further questions on the report? Very call, Commissioner. Okay, Ms. Snuffy.
Okay, just a general question about your report. I didn't see anything in your handout regarding whether you have water and power for these homes once they're built. And then also if they're gonna have like appliances, the bathroom fixtures and kitchen stoves, refrigerators, that sort of thing. And then if they're gonna be handicap accessible. And then if they're gonna have like porches, back door porches, that sort of thing. Previously, I remember it's been what, maybe the 21st budget and finance, I think it was, they had issues with that because some of their constituents came to them when I think it was the Division of Community Development provided them. They didn't have, their homes didn't have a porch. You know, they had the doors and everything, but they couldn't get up into their homes. They just had their homes. And so the constituents were questioning, you know, how do we, who do we talk to about building us a porch to get into the house? And then once they were in, some of them needed the handicap hallways, the doors and things like that. They didn't have that. And then some of them, they said they didn't have stoves and those types of things, appliances, bathroom fixtures in the homes. They just had the structure, and that was it. And the power, and water wasn't connected and stuff. And so I wondered if that is included in your planning and that's included in your funds that you have available too. How is that? Those were concerns that committees have brought up, you know, for some of this construction that's going on.
I think, Ms. Knock, thank you for raising that to that point. I think, Speaker Damon and both, Vice Chair Slater asked about the RFP and RFQ because it's in another phase of change. So I know that discussion is continuing, but, Mr. Delgay and Mr. Wasetta, if you could update the committee on that discussion as those changes are being made. Do you all have an update at this point?
Yes. Okay, thank you for that question, Ms. Nakai. As far as infrastructure connections go, we would like to have these homes connected as soon as possible. We're focusing on homes that have utilities nearby. If they're we can be reconnected, or if there may be a couple yards away from the home site, we work with the utility company to provide possibly a cost estimate, what that amount could be, and what we need to do to get those sources to take care of that cost. If we were to get the home and put it near the previous connection, the cost there may not be as much as again running a line, what they call a service line agreement. ADA compliant. In my application, I provided, and mentioned that, the applicants can include any, doctor statement or, some type of, statement saying that what their health situation is, if they're, in a wheelchair, or if they need, accessible, accessories included in their home. We can also include that in the homes, and throw that in, with the scope of work or with the specs. And then as far as the ramps go, with, or steps or stairs into the main entrance, we can, look into that also, just based off of, information we received in the application. If need be, we can work with the chapters and have them possibly use maybe their, local, personnel or PEP workers, we call, to, assist in, constructing, either a ramp or, steps, to the home. But the money that, we received through this 50 million, was just for the home itself. And, with the appliances, I'll have, Mr. Waseda go ahead and, go into that as far as, his experience in getting, those types of, necessities.
Madam Chair, and committee, and Mr. Nakai. I'll rebrief on this. In terms of the power water, there's a priority listing that's been established, and what they're calling it is on-site utility connections. On-site utility connections has existing power water. And what they're asking as individuals, find enough space that they can either build or place a modular unit within those parameters, utilizing the existing system. So if there's a dilapidated house and it's connected, we remove that portion, place the unit there, and then connect to the existing units. If there's, say within 1,500 feet, there's a threshold that we're looking at with NQA with service line agreement. So they're working on those priority listings for power, water, and then the septic systems. Okay. The other portions that was questioned about is 88. Utilizing construction methods, just basically just have everything with ADA spec'd out. So you'll have all of the restrooms, hallways already have internal framing in case down the road someone needs grab bars, they know where to put them onto the wall, whatever. But at a certain age, there is going to be established units in there that will be part of the specifications of the units. So that will help out. As for porches, it's depending on the unit there, but there will be, say, wheelchair accessibilities will require porches, depending how large it is, and that will be a cost that we're going to have to look at in terms of the suitability and attachments that will be applied there, because certain wheelchairs, if they're using, say, electric wheelchairs, some of these individuals they have electric wheelchairs, there's a certain requirement for construction because of the weight threshold that needs to go up in their area. And as for stoves, bathroom accessories, refrigerators, and heating systems, those are all going to be components of the unit. The one thing that we're evaluating though is we're trying to stay away from propane. Propane is expensive and you don't want to put a burden on individuals. Because some areas propane is like $13-14 a gallon. So if you're running a 200-gallon tank and grandma has only SSI of $600 a month, that's a big burden there. So those are the things that we're looking at in terms of suitability. The big thing, a part of this is everything needs to be energy efficient. So, and looking at the modest home design, we don't want, my recommendation is do not build mini Dubai, meaning these big units, something small, spacious that can retain heat, stay cool in the summer. That's kind of what we're looking at. So, Ms. Naki, to answer the question, I hope that's satisfies what your questions, and There is still a lot of, this is why it's based on the qualifications, because there's still some areas there that, we're gonna need to really incorporate. In terms of design criteria. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lucetta, and for just the details that are in between the lines and still continue to be discussed. With that, colleagues, I'm gonna ask for another call for questions or comments on this report. Hearing none.
Yes, I'm Madam Chair, roll call vote,
Can you get, Doug Davis?
accepting the report.
Great.
Supervisor, it's green, Honorable Amber body any vote? I'm sorry, thank you today, Honorable Amber body green, Honorable Seth Davis, how do you vote?
Agree.
Thank you, Honorable Seth Davis, it's green. Madam Chair, we have 3 members voting in the affirmative or opposing, 2 members not voting. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, and thank you, Mr. Lucetta and Mr. Doggy for the update to the committee. Look forward to the progress of the efforts. Thank you. So, committee members, we're gonna go to the next item on the agenda, which is old business. We have none. We're on new business. Doug Davis. Or Speaker Davis. I'm gonna go to the business now. And the first item on new business is scheduling. There are several items under scheduling. The first item is meeting with nomination President Drew Nygren. Number 2 is November 2nd priority. Number 3 is scheduling November 7th, election day. On November 7th, it's county and state election, county election day. So the social ethics committee would like to consider scheduling November 7th if the committee members are not available that day. And also the attendance in the civic parliamentary budget council meeting November 6th to the 10th. That is under one scheduling item, so committee members, that's the proposal, but the floor is open to any motions or modifications for the scheduling. Committee members?
With all your meeting friends.
There, let's go, works, well. If we don't have a motion, we can go off record to do discussion, but.
You want to discuss for the detail. I used to, you don't.
Okay, you go off record, it's just we talk about it. Okay, a motion to go off record. Or more than.
It's to go off record for no more than 10 minutes to discuss the scheduling items. Do we have a second to the motion? Delegate Aldrich, second to the motion to go off record for 10 minutes and to discuss scheduling items. Committee members, do we have any questions for the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Nelson, can you roll call vote?
That's all the roll call vote for the discussion. Okay, moderator, what's green? Honorable Anderson, but how do you vote? Critical. Thank you. Thank you. I'll David on screen. Now sharing 3 members voting in the affirmative or opposing, 2 members not voting.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. We will come back at 12:44. Entering into scheduling, so the items on the Good afternoon to everybody. We're gonna go back on record. So the discussion that we've had, the proposal is, our update, I guess. If somebody would like to motion to have a proposed meeting with President Nygren on November 13th at 1 p.m. and rescheduling our November 2nd priorities to November 13th at 1 p.m. Sorry, 14th at 1 p.m. rescheduled at 9 a.m. Oh my gosh, it's all over the place. And then rescheduling our November 7th meeting to November 14th. 15th at 9, yeah, at 1 p.m. Yes, and attendance certificate.
Okay.
Okay, motion by Speaker David, second by Delegate Azarick. May members have any questions?
Oh,
The 15th is for the.
Yes, yeah. Strategic session is the 15th, the meeting with the president is the 13th, and then the budget and finance meeting is the 14th. Yes. So, not in order, but yes. That's the motion and the second, committee members, we have a second question.
I have a modification. If it hasn't been done already, but my modifications also include attendance to attend the meeting on with NHA and LBC in Albuquerque on November 17th. That's my modification. To add into that. I don't know if we approved that already, but okay, that's where. Yeah.
Thank you. The modification to the motion is to include the NHA meeting between the budget and finance committee and the research and development committee. Meet on November 17th at Albuquerque. Delegate Azarick, team member. Delegate Azarick. Committee members, do you have any questions? Second call. Hearing none, Ms. Nelson, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes, on roll call vote on accepting the scheduling. More accurate votes green, roll accepting, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, I was accepting votes green, roll accepting, how do you vote? Thank you, allocating votes green. Madam Chair, we have 3 members voting in the affirmative, Madam Chair not voting, and 2 members not voting.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson, thank you, committee members, with that motion carries. We're going to go to item 9, closed session, for any announcement and adjournment. Do you have a motion to adjourn today? Delegate Azarick, motions to adjourn. Second.
So I second.
Second to adjourn. Not until November.
Yeah.
Does nothing can you roll call what's adjourn?
Yes, roll call vote to adjourn, Mark, sir, how do you vote? Thank you, more accurate votes green, roll accepting, how do you vote?
What's your name?
Arnold Santina, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, Arnold, how do you vote? Green. Thank you, David, Arnold, and Ms. Right, votes green. Madam, members voting in the affirmative, you're opposing, you're not voting, Madam, you're not voting, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With that, we are adjourned at 12:58. Looking forward to seeing everyone on November 4th. Voting. Is that right?